Have you ever wondered if being alone is a sign of weakness or a hidden strength? Why does solitude feel so heavy, yet strangely freeing? And what would one of the wisest Stoic philosophers in history, Seneca, say if he were sitting beside you tonight in silence? Loneliness is often painted as a shadowy figure in our lives, creeping in through quiet rooms and whispered regrets. But for Seneca, the great Roman thinker and statesman, solitude was not a punishment. It was a gift, a rare, sacred space where the soul could unclench, observe itself, and grow roots that no storm could ever tear apart. In this video, we journey deep into Seneca's mind to uncover the hidden power of being alone. Not just surviving solitude, but thriving in it. Not fearing isolation, but transforming it into clarity, resilience, and peace. If you've ever felt the sting of loneliness, stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you may see that solitude is not your enemy, but your most unexpected ally. Seneca once wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." And what better opportunity to learn this than when we are alone, stripped of distractions, unmasked from our social roles? Imagine this, a man exiled from Rome, sent to live far from the buzzing political life he once controlled. Many would crumble, but not Seneca. In solitude, he didn't rot, he wrote. He didn't despair. He discovered that the human spirit left on its own is not an empty vessel but a fertile field. Solitude was his school, and it can be yours too. Let's strip back the noise of modern life for a moment. No buzzing phones, no emails, no notifications screaming for your attention, just silence. How does that feel? Unsettling? Freeing? Perhaps both. You see, solitude is not just a physical space, it's a psychological mirror. When we are alone, we meet ourselves. No filters, no audience. Just the raw presence of who we are. Seneca called this retreating into oneself. He believed that solitude was not about being away from others, but being present with the self. He wrote letters, beautiful, timeless reflections that speak across centuries, reminding us that solitude is where wisdom is born, where emotional independence begins, where we stop trying to be everything to everyone and begin being someone to ourselves. There's a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is a hunger for others. Solitude is a feast with oneself. Seneca didn't believe you had to suffer to grow, but he knew that suffering could be a teacher if approached wisely. And solitude, in its quiet way, often brings us the pain we've been avoiding, the questions we've buried. But it also brings something else, the answers we never thought we had. Think about it. When have your most profound thoughts arrived? When the world was noisy, or when the world was still? In one letter, Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "We are not given life short, but we make it short." What did he mean by that? He meant that we waste time chasing illusions, running from ourselves, and filling every moment with distraction, when the very answers we seek lie in silence. He urged Lucilius to spend time alone, to reflect, to read, to write, not as a withdrawal from life, but as a deeper engagement with it. Seneca's words act like a lantern in a cave. They don't remove the darkness, but they help you see within it. He believed solitude was a test of character. Could you enjoy your own company? Could you think deeply without needing others to validate your thoughts? Could you sit with boredom and find beauty in it? In a world addicted to stimulation, solitude is an act of rebellion. But for Seneca, it was an act of liberation. There's a strange paradox to solitude. It can feel like an exile, yet lead to the richest kind of inner freedom. We live in an age of constant connection, yet disconnection has never felt deeper. Ironically, the more we fear being alone, the more we run from what can actually heal us. Solitude is not a punishment, it is a path to knowing what you really want, a path to healing wounds you forgot were there, a path to strength that doesn't shout, but endures. Seneca once said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." But he also knew that the best association begins within. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when the applause is gone? In solitude, you find out. He believed that time alone could be used to train the mind, like a sword sharpened on the stone of thought. He compared the soul to a garden. If neglected, weeds grow. If tended, it bears fruit. Solitude, then, is the gardener's moment, the space where reflection becomes cultivation, stillness becomes transformation. And here's the secret. Seneca knew solitude doesn't isolate you from the world. It prepares you for it. It builds the strength to love without clinging, to work without losing yourself, to speak without needing approval. It makes you whole, so you can meet others whole. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt comfortable in your own silence? Not bored, not restless, but truly at peace? Seneca's life was far from easy. He endured exile, political turmoil, and even faced death at the hand of a tyrant. Yet through it all, he returned again and again to one principle. Inner peace is not the absence of pain, but the presence of perspective. And that perspective is forged not in crowds, but in quiet. Seneca's wisdom often arrives like a soft knock on the door, unassuming, quiet, but impossible to ignore. He doesn't shout over your thoughts. He waits for them to settle and then he speaks. And when he speaks, you realize something powerful. Solitude is not the absence of connection, it is the root of it. When you know yourself deeply, you stop clinging to shallow companionship. You stop fearing silence. You stop chasing distractions. You begin to choose relationships from strength, not scarcity. You begin to show up in the world not as a seeker of attention, but as a giver of value. And you begin to understand a rare kind of joy, the joy of sufficiency, the joy of being enough. Just you, no performance, no mask, no audience. Seneca was trying to tell us this all along. We are not broken because we are alone. We are broken because we believe being alone is a failure. But solitude is not failure. It's freedom. One of Seneca's most hauntingly beautiful lines is, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And in our endless scrolling, liking, swiping, replying, we are hemorrhaging presence. We are giving away the rarest currency we have, attention. And for what?" Seneca challenges us to pull back, to slow down, to be with ourselves not as critics, but as caretakers. He would say, stop fearing the empty room. It's not empty, you are there. In solitude, we begin to hear the quiet voice of our true desires, the career path that actually matters, the relationships that nourish, the dreams we buried under practicality. All of it returns, slowly, in the hush of isolation. That's why solitude can be so painful, because it brings truth. But that pain is a doorway, not a wall. On the other side is clarity. Seneca's letters are filled with gentle urgings to embrace time alone. Not to wallow in it, not to escape the world, but to renew your spirit before re-entering it, to ask better questions, to cultivate a mind that is not reactive but reflective. He writes, "Withdraw into yourself as far as you can." And then, he adds almost like a whisper, "Associate with those who make you better. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve." It's a two-way flow. You fill yourself in solitude so that when you return to society, you pour out value, not neediness. It's strange, isn't it? We've made solitude into a punishment in our culture. We send prisoners into solitary confinement. We use being alone as a curse. And yet, Seneca used it as a forge, a place to shape ideas, to deepen virtue, to explore the soul. So maybe we've been thinking about it all wrong. Maybe the question isn't, how do I stop feeling lonely? Maybe the question is, what is this loneliness trying to show me? Because here's something Seneca understood better than most. You can be surrounded by people and still be utterly alone, and you can be physically alone and feel deeply connected to the universe, to nature, to your inner compass. Solitude is not about location, it's about presence. He warned against constant busyness, calling it a form of slavery. He saw men chasing wealth, women chasing status, entire cities chasing noise, and he wondered, where is their peace? Where is their stillness? So he stepped back, not to escape, but to understand. And in that understanding, he found something priceless: contentment. Let me ask you something, quietly and sincerely. What would happen if, for just one day, you embraced your solitude fully? No distractions, no escape, just you, a notebook, and your thoughts. What might rise to the surface? What clarity might appear? Would you write something beautiful? Forgive someone deeply? Remember a part of yourself you had forgotten? That is the power Seneca is offering. Not just quotes to inspire, but practices to transform. He advises us not to be everywhere, but to be with ourselves. He tells us that if we cannot enjoy our own company, we will always be a slave to external approval. And he challenges us to redefine strength, not as power over others, but as peace within ourselves. Is solitude a curse? Only if you fear the truth. Is it a gift? Absolutely, if you're willing to open it, because when the world finally quiets, your soul speaks, and what it says might surprise you. Sometimes the silence of solitude is not quiet at all. It echoes. It reverberates through every room of your heart, every hallway of your mind. It asks questions you don't want to answer and brings memories you thought you had buried. But this too is part of the gift. Seneca didn't run from these echoes. He walked with them. He used them. In his letters, he often invited his friend Lucilius, and by extension all of us, to sit with the discomfort. To use solitude not just as a break, but as a crucible. A place where the raw materials of your life are burned down, reshaped, refined into something stronger. And in the middle of this burning, a strange thing happens. You begin to enjoy your own thoughts. Not all of them, of course. Some will be painful, some will be confusing. But among them a clarity emerges, a voice that says, "This is what truly matters," a voice that is not the world's, but your own. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." In solitude, we see this truth up close. How much of our daily suffering comes not from real need, but from imagined lack. From the illusion that we are missing something essential, when in fact we are whole. That's why solitude is so powerful. It doesn't add to you, it reveals you. And maybe that's why so many people run from it. Because when all the noise fades, we are left with the truth of ourselves. The parts we've ignored, the hopes we've delayed, the fears we've denied. But in that exposure lies a kind of sacred honesty, a moment where we can stop pretending, a moment where we can say, "This is who I am, and from here I will grow." Seneca believed that a person who could be alone and content was unbreakable, because their joy did not depend on circumstance, their strength did not rely on approval, their direction did not shift with the crowd. They were anchored, not to people or things, but to principle. He was not against society. He was not promoting isolation as a lifestyle. He was advocating for balance, for rhythm, for the ability to step away so that when we return, we are better, clearer, calmer, more intentional. In today's world, solitude is both harder and more necessary than ever. We are connected to thousands yet known by few. We are flooded with content yet starving for depth. We are endlessly stimulated yet chronically anxious. What if the cure was not more, but less? Less noise, less scrolling, less comparing, less performing, and more time alone, more time writing, more time thinking, more time being. This is not weakness, this is wisdom, and this wisdom, Seneca's wisdom, is not just for philosophers in togas. It's for anyone who has ever felt like they don't belong, anyone who has sat alone at night wondering if something is wrong with them, anyone who has questioned their worth in the absence of applause. To those people, maybe to you, Seneca offers this. Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. He is reminding us that every moment of solitude is not empty time. It is a canvas. You can write on it, you can rest on it, you can build on it, but only if you stop resisting it. So let me ask you sincerely, what would it look like for you to welcome solitude not as a threat, but as a teacher? What might you learn if you stopped running from yourself? What might you build if you gave your mind a moment to breathe? Seneca doesn't promise that solitude is always easy, but he promises that it's always worth it, because in the end, the relationship you have with yourself is the foundation for every other relationship you will ever have. Imagine this. You're sitting in a small, quiet room. No music, no phone, just you, a journal, and a flickering candle. Outside, the world keeps moving, but inside something rare is happening. You're listening to the silence, yes, but also to yourself. This was the kind of moment Seneca treasured. He believed that even amidst a noisy empire, a man could find a private sanctuary. Not in the forest, not in a faraway temple, but in the chambers of his own soul. That was where he went when the world became too loud. That was where he went, to remember who he was, and that is what solitude gives you, the power to remember your values, your principles, your reasons. Because in the chaos of life, it's so easy to forget. We chase things that don't matter. We say yes to people we don't align with. We silence our instincts just to be accepted. But solitude brings everything back into focus. It shows us not who we pretend to be, but who we really are. Seneca knew this better than anyone. He had been a rising star in the Roman court, a man of wealth and power. But he also knew the emptiness that came with applause, the hollowness that followed shallow victories. He wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and solitude for him was a way to separate the imagined from the true. When we are alone, we stop performing. And when we stop performing, we begin healing. The room becomes a mirror. And slowly we come to recognize the face looking back, not the filtered version we present to the world, but the unfiltered, honest self that we've avoided. And in that recognition, something miraculous happens. Forgiveness, grace, reconnection. We stop judging ourselves for being imperfect and start being curious about who we are becoming. Seneca would ask, "Why do you fear being alone with yourself? Is there something you are afraid to face?" That's not condemnation, that's an invitation to go deeper, to look under the surface, to stop numbing and start noticing. What are you really feeling? What is your mind trying to tell you? What is your soul asking you to release? In solitude, these answers come. Not quickly, not always comfortably, but inevitably. And when they come, they don't just offer insight. They offer direction. That's the heart of Stoicism. Not philosophy as abstract theory, but as daily practice, as applied clarity. And solitude is where that clarity is distilled. It's where the Stoic becomes the sculptor of his own mind. You begin carving away the unnecessary, the comparison, the envy, the ego. You begin building patience, gratitude, stillness. And soon, solitude no longer feels like a desert. It becomes a well, a place you go not because you're broken, but because you're becoming whole. And here's the surprising part. When you learn to enjoy your own company, your external relationships also change. You stop entering them from lack. You stop needing constant validation. You begin offering presence instead of performance, depth instead of distraction. That is the ripple effect of solitude. It doesn't isolate you. It elevates you. It makes you a better partner, a better parent, a better creator, a better human. Because when your cup is full, you stop drinking from others. You start giving. You start serving. You start living with intention, not addiction. This is what Seneca was writing about all those centuries ago, and it's more relevant now than ever. Maybe that's what Seneca ultimately wanted for us, not a life of retreat, but a life of richness. A life where we are not afraid to pause, to reflect, to recalibrate. A life that isn't built on the noise of others, but on the quiet certainties of our own inner voice. Because in solitude, we stop asking, "Am I enough?" And we start realizing, "I always was." We begin to trust the quiet, to embrace the stillness, and to recognize that what the world calls loneliness, the Stoics may have called a sacred return, a return to center, a return to peace, a return to what cannot be shaken by applause or abandoned by rejection. So if you're feeling alone tonight, know this: you are not broken. You are being invited into a deeper relationship with yourself, into clarity, into strength, into a truth. You are not missing out on life. You are meeting it. And in the words of Seneca, begin at once to live. If these Stoic quotes helped you find peace in your loneliness, Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More Stoic wisdom. Says on the way, and leave a dot so I know you were here.